Chapter 1. The Spare Key. We moved into the house in March. It was a standard suburban home, 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, a garage we used for storage. The previous owners had left it in good condition. We changed the locks the first week, the way everyone tells you to, and felt settled almost immediately. It was the kind of house that felt like it had always been ours. The first sign that something was wrong came 6 weeks after we moved in. Small things, the kind you explain away easily at first. A kitchen cabinet left open when I was sure I'd closed it. A chair pulled slightly away from the table in a way neither my wife nor I remembered doing. The feeling, which I dismissed immediately every time it came, that something in the house was slightly different from how I'd left it. Not dramatically, not obviously, just off by a degree that I couldn't quite articulate. My wife noticed it too, but neither of us said anything to the other for almost 2 weeks, which tells you something about how much we both wanted it to not be real. The first concrete thing happened on a Tuesday evening in April. I came home from work to find the back door unlocked. My wife had left for work before me that morning, and I had been the last one out. I was certain I had locked it. I was certain because I always checked it twice, a habit I'd had since childhood. But it was unlocked when I got home, and the deadbolt was in the open position, not just the handle. You can't turn a deadbolt from the outside without a key. We had 2 keys. Mine was in my pocket. My wife's was on her keychain at work. I called a locksmith the next day and had the back door rekeyed. The locksmith, while examining the lock, paused for a moment and then showed me something. On the inner face of the deadbolt mechanism, there were small scratches, the kind that come from a key being used repeatedly, he said. Not from picking, from a key that fit the lock exactly. The previous owners had told us they had given us all their copies. We believed them. The locksmith's assessment suggested there had been at least one more. After that, I started noticing other things. A smell in the basement that came and went. Not damp or mold, something else, something that reminded me of a person. A depression in the old couch in the basement that my wife said she hadn't made and I hadn't made. Canned food from the basement storage shelf that I was almost certain had been moved, though I couldn't prove it because I hadn't photographed the original arrangement. I set up a camera in the basement. A simple one, motion activated, the kind you buy for under $50. I didn't tell my wife because I didn't want to frighten her if I was wrong. I told myself I was probably wrong. I set up the camera on a Thursday night before bed and checked it the next morning before she woke up. There were 6 motion-triggered recordings from overnight. The first 5 were nothing. The camera adjusting to light changes, probably, or a draft moving something at the edge of the frame. The 6th was from 3:22 a.m. The 6th clip was 44 seconds long. I watched it 3 times before I understood what I was seeing. The basement was dark except for the camera's night vision. The clip showed the basement from the corner where the camera was positioned. The couch, the storage shelves, the door to the basement stairs.
The door to the stairs was open. It had been closed when I went to bed.
The clip showed nothing entering or leaving through the door. But at second 21, in the darkness on the couch, something moved. Something that had been there the whole time, still enough that I hadn't noticed it at first, shifted position, not dramatically, just enough to confirm that it was there and that it was aware of the camera. I called the police that morning. They searched the house and found nothing. They found no evidence of forced entry, no evidence of a person having been in the house. The officer I spoke to was kind, but suggested I may have misread the footage. I know what I saw. We moved out 2 weeks later. The landlord kept our deposit. I didn't argue. I've thought about it every night since, not about who was in my basement, but about how long they had been there before I thought to look. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had been converted from an old factory sometime in the 90s. High ceilings, original hardwood, the kind of place that looked better in photographs than it did at midnight when the building made the sounds that old converted buildings make. I lived there for 2 years before the apartment below mine was rented. For those 2 years, apartment 2C had been empty. The building manager told me it had been empty for almost 4 years before I moved in. A previous tenant had broken the lease, and the owner had been slow to renovate. It sat empty below me, and I thought nothing of it. An empty apartment below you is quiet. I liked quiet. Then in January of my 3rd year, someone moved into 2C. I heard them moving furniture, and the sound carried through the floors clearly, and I made a mental note to introduce myself in the hallway at some point. I never did, because I never saw them. In 6 months of having a neighbor directly below me, I never once encountered them in the hallway, the elevator, the lobby, or the parking lot. I heard them, but I never saw them. What I heard was this: footsteps pacing slowly back and forth, usually late at night, and what I calculated was the main room of the apartment directly below my bedroom. The pacing had a particular rhythm: 7 steps in one direction, a pause, 7 steps back. I counted it many times because the regularity of it was what kept me awake. Not the sound itself, which was soft, but the pattern, which never varied. 7 steps, pause, 7 steps, every night between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. I knocked on 2C's door twice. Both times I heard the pacing stop immediately when I knocked. Both times there was a long silence. Both times no one came to the door, and when I pressed my ear against it, I could hear breathing on the other side, slow and deliberate, very close to the door, as if whoever was inside had walked to the door and stopped just on the other side of it and was waiting for me to leave. I left both times. I don't know why I didn't say anything, didn't call through the door, didn't insist. Something about the quality of the silence on the other side of that door made me not want to. In May, I mentioned the neighbor to my building manager while paying rent. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't read. Then he told me that 2C was still empty, that no one had moved in, that he hadn't rented it, and had no plans to rent it because the renovation still wasn't complete. I asked him about the furniture sounds I'd heard in January. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. I moved out at the end of my lease in August. On my last night in the building, at 1 a.m., I heard the pacing start below me. One final time, 7 steps, pause, 7 steps. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to it for a long time. I still don't know what was in 2C. I don't know if it's still pacing. I don't know if whoever moved into my apartment after me can hear it. I've thought about leaving them a note. I never have. The room at the end. The house my grandmother left us when she died had a room at the end of the upstairs hallway that she had kept locked for as long as any of us could remember. Not sealed, locked, with a key she kept on her person at all times that she never explained and never offered to explain. When we asked as children, she would redirect us with the particular skill that older people have of making you feel the question was never worth asking.
We stopped asking. The locked door became part of the house's background, like the smell of the kitchen or the particular sound the 3rd stair made.
She died in November, and by January my mother and I were clearing the house to sell it. The key was on her keychain with the others. I don't know which one of us suggested we open the room. I think we both assumed the other would, and then we both stood in the upstairs hallway in front of that door, and neither of us moved for a moment. I unlocked it. The room was small, smaller than I expected, as if the walls were thicker than they should have been for a room of that size. It was empty. No furniture, no storage, no explanation, a single window with the curtains drawn. The air inside was stale, in a way that suggested the door had not been opened in a very long time, and there was a smell I recognized from very old spaces, from places that have been closed off from the normal movement of air and time. On the floor in the center of the room, there was a chair, Just one chair, facing the door, positioned exactly in the center of the room, as if placed there deliberately, as if someone had sat in it facing the door and then simply gotten up and walked away. My mother and I stood in the doorway for a long time without speaking. Then she said, quietly, that she remembered asking her mother once, only once, when she was very young, what was in the room, and her mother had said, nothing you need to worry about. And then she had said, almost to herself, as if she had forgotten my mother was there, it just needs somewhere to be. We didn't go into the room. We locked it again. When we sold the house, we disclosed everything we were legally required to disclose and nothing we were not. The room is someone else's now. The key, as far as I know, is still on my grandmother's keychain in a drawer in my mother's house. I think about what she said sometimes. Well, it just needs somewhere to be. I think about whoever bought the house and whether they opened the room and whether the chair is still there. I think about what it means to give something a place to exist. I think about whether, now that the house has changed hands, it has found somewhere else. I hope it hasn't. But I've started checking the rooms in my own house more carefully than I used to, just in case.